Good afternoon. Late last week, the organisers of this event said to me, "John, would you mind doing a TED-type presentation?" And I had every intention over the weekend of memorising my presentation, but my 3.5-year-old son had a very different plan for me last weekend. So today I'm here standing well away from any lectern, but I am holding my notes. So this makes it an almost TED-like presentation. There are now 7 billion people living on our planet. That is 7 billion people consuming biodiversity every day in the form of medicine, in the form of clothes, in the form of perfume, furniture, luxury goods. The consumption of biodiversity is growing at an unprecedented rate, and our ability to harvest from nature knows no limits. This is challenging the ability of communities and governments to make use of their resources sustainably, including not threatening the survival of species in the wild. And hundreds of millions of people rely on biodiversity for their livelihoods and for their survival, most particularly local and Indigenous communities. But how do we know that we are harvesting wildlife in a sustainable manner? Who's collecting the data? Who's analysing it? Who's got access to it? And how's that being done? We need indicators to measure the impact of taking species from the wild, to ensure that we're doing it in a sustainable way, and to understand the impact of taking species on the whole ecosystem. But how do you measure against indicators? If you're going to measure against indicators, you need to have up-to-date data. You need analytical tools. You need to provide open and transparent access to data and information. CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. How does it do it? This is a convention that stands at the intersection between trade, environment, and development. This convention is needed more today than it was in March 1973 when it was adopted in Washington, DC. What CITES does is it regulates the trade in almost 35,000 species of plants and animals, both terrestrial and marine, including their parts and derivatives. But commercial trade is only prohibited in 3% of those species, or about 1,000 of those species, perhaps the most well-known being the tiger. For the other 97% of species, or close to 33,000 species, such as orchids, vicunias, crocodile, mahogany, trade is regulated to be sure that it is legal, it is sustainable, and it is traceable. And CITES data assist countries to track legal international trade in these species, to see what impact it is having on the environment, and to see what impact it is having on the survival of species in the wild. However, we've got a problem. International illegal trade in wildlife is estimated by some to be worth up to $10 billion per year, and that is excluding timber and marine species. This is pushing many species towards extinction. To give you an example, the value of rhino horn on the black market is now seen as being more valuable than gold. This picture here from colleagues with the Hong Kong authorities was just taken last month. In one seizure, they took 33 rhino horns. This illegal trade robs local people of their livelihoods, and it robs countries of their cultural and their natural heritage. It must be stopped, and states need assistance to achieve this. With those sorts of figures, perhaps it comes as no surprise that illegal trade in wildlife has now been infiltrated by organised crime. As such, has been recognised by the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, Interpol, and the World Bank. We need a far more sophisticated and coordinated effort at combating the illegal trade in wildlife. And in November of last year at the Tiger Summit in St. Petersburg, we launched a consortium, the International Consortium to Combat Wildlife Crime. It's a consortium of CITES, Interpol, the World Customs Organization, the World Bank, and the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime. And I must say this has the highest level support across all of these organisations. And having just heard from the World Bank, I would like to also recognise the strong support from President Zerlich of the World Bank to this initiative and to tackling illegal trade in wildlife more generally. What does this consortium do? It's taking the fight against wildlife crime to another level, but how is it doing that? It's doing that because the 5 organisations I've just mentioned are now sharing data. They're sharing analysis, they're sharing intelligence, they're sharing enforcement techniques and resources so that we can take this battle up to the organised syndicates that are involved. CITES is about putting good concepts into practice. We desperately need more practice and less theory. Over the last 36 years, CITES has put into place the largest global effort at giving meaning to the concept of the sustainable use of biodiversity, with significant benefits for both local communities and the global community. CITES regulated trade is a multi-billion-dollar business. CITES parties currently issue over 850,000 permits per year. These are permits that effectively certify that that trade is both legal and sustainable. And all of that data is provided to the CITES Secretariat. And we now have over 11 million recorded trades of wildlife in our database. And this is the world's most extensive and open access collection of data on the sustainable use of biodiversity. These are trades that national science authorities have effectively certified as not being detrimental to the survival of the species in the wild, or in other words, sustainable. And many of these transactions have contributed towards the decrease of poverty, in particular in rural areas that are dependent upon wildlife, through improving wildlife management and thereby supporting sustainable development and the achievement of the Millennium Development Goals. And this nexus between CITES and poverty eradication is something that should be addressed in the context of the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development happening in Rio next year. We are working with organisations such as the World Customs Organization on bringing to our parties new information and communication technologies. Of particular interest is the work we're doing with World Customs Organization and all of our parties on electronic trade data. We are moving forward so that we will no longer have paper permits, we will move to a purely electronic system. And we're grateful to countries such as Brazil, which has advanced technology for dealing with electronic permitting, because it is making its technology available free of charge to all of the countries within its region. Our project on electronic trade data is not only relevant to CITES, it's relevant to trade in any biodiversity good, including, most particularly, trade in genetic resources. The immediate registration of trades through the electronic data system will be of great value to everybody. It'll be of great value to scientists, it'll be of great value to those involved in making policy, it'll be of great value to enforcement officials and to the general public to have real-time information on international trade in species to monitor the impact on the environment and to ensure it is sustainable. And it also helps tackle illegal trade by providing a much more secure system. We're also developing innovative and cutting-edge electronic tools with the data that we hold. The first of these tools is the CITES dashboards. So we don't just provide you with 11 million records of trade. What we've done is we've made this available through a series of charts, a series of graphs, so that you can graphically see the manner in which trade has occurred over the past 36 years in relation to a species or in relation to a country. And CITES has a cutting-edge program known as Monitoring Illegal Killing of Elephants. We do this together with partners such as IUCN. We are working across the range states of the Asian and the African elephant. And in particular in Africa, we are working on the ground in 31 of the 37 range states, dealing with local officers, monitoring the population status of elephants. We are providing up-to-date field data that states need in order to make the sort of informed decisions that have to be taken on managing elephant populations and dealing with enforcement-related issues. And at the same time, we're building sustainable capacity, not only to manage sustainably elephant populations, but to also manage other species. And the skills that are required through this MIC program can be replicated right across the board. But capacity is needed in order to manage data, interpret data, and make it useful for decision making. There are massive demands for capacity building under CITES, and what we have created is a virtual college in order to help meet those demands. This is free of charge, it's available 24 hours, 7 days a week, and it's designed to help our parties build the capacity they need through management authorities, science authorities, enforcement authorities to meet the obligations they have under the Convention. We've tried to mimic traditional learning here in terms of the ability to interact with individuals through this course, to have mentors, to have access to experts, etc. And we only launched it in June of this year, but we've already had 3,000 users make use of this virtual college across 144 countries. But we've also linked this virtual college to a real university. It is linked to the International University of Andalusia, which has a master's course which is specifically targeted at CITES. And over the past 10 years, they have had 235 graduates from 68 countries. What that master's level course is now doing is saying that they will cut the period of time that you have to come to Baeza to undertake the master's, but you must first complete the course set out in the virtual college. We have linked the virtual college to a real-life master's level training course. CITES also conceived and co-manages together with UNEP, which has the lead here, what is known as Informaea. Informaea is a web portal that brings together 13 multilateral environmental agreements and 3 UN institutions. And what it does is it enables you to harvest information and data from all of those multilateral environmental agreements and all of those organisations through one portal. So if you want to know what has been decided across any of these agreements on trade in wildlife, genetic resources, Indigenous peoples, you can make the search and it will harvest from all of the data sets any decisions, any resolutions that have been taken with respect to the issue of your query. There is one body of international environmental law. There is not hundreds of multilateral environmental agreements. There is one body of international environmental law. And what this portal does is gives expression to that. It enables you to have a coherent understanding of exactly what's been decided in different fora at different times, and as policymakers to take coherent decisions going forwards. Delegates, overexploitation through illegal trade and unsustainable international trade poses an immediate risk to biodiversity. Responding to this risk has clear biodiversity benefits at the global level as well as local benefits. Our efforts that I've outlined today in tackling wildlife crime, implementing electronic permitting, systematically collecting data, making that data available in very usable formats, building strong national capacity, are all steps on the path to a future where every country has the ability to ensure that trade is legal, it is sustainable, and it is traceable. Our vision for the future, in order to achieve that objective, is that all countries have access to coordinated and formidable support in tackling illegal trade in wildlife. That they have up-to-the-minute access to data on all international trade in wildlife wherever it occurs. That they have access to capacity building courses online 24 hours, 7 days a week, including to experts and mentors who can assist them with their capacity building needs. that they have the capacity to mine, analyse, and use data and information and make that available to all. But also they have the capacity to link different data sets so that they can make coherent and connected policy choices. A sustainable future is within our grasp if we generate knowledge in an open and interconnected way, in an easy-to-understand way, to enable informed, coherent, and measurable decisions. We need to commit to these principles, but perhaps even more importantly, we need to find tangible ways of giving expression to them. And what I've tried to share with you today are some of the tangible ways in which we have tried to give meaning to the sorts of principles to which we all adhere. And we have an ideal opportunity to secure renewed political commitment to closing the knowledge gap in Rio in 2012. Let's not let that opportunity pass us by. Thank you.